2, 1, go.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Questionable Perspective Podcast, number 26. I'm
Twenty.
host FGC Chris, and my co-host PhD Joshua. How you doing today, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Doing
And
good.
now, go ahead.
That's it. I'm going to turn it over to you and introduce our guest tonight.
Now, we have a very special guest, Mr. Douglas Ernest. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
No, it's Ernst, but it's okay. People can
Ernst?
call me
Okay.
Ernest my entire life, so I
I
am used to
I feel you. My name's Joshua and Joshua.
it.
Like all the time. But our guest here today is one of, I would say, the rising stars in the indie comic scene. He's the writer of Soulfinder. Now, I do want to ask this, Mr. Douglas, what got you into starting the Soulfinder series?
So basically, I've loved comics since I was a kid. I've told people before that I learned how to read on comic books. My oldest brother used to sit on a ugly green chair with me, and I'd come up and basically like sit on his lap or the arm of the chair, and he would read Iron Man to me. He'd read Spider-Man and Daredevil and all that. And that's literally how I learned how to read. It was on comic books. So I always loved them. But then as I got older, I noticed that many of the heroes that I grew up with who were clearly good men, objectively good men and heroes, the way that they were written by modern writers ended up being more either anti-heroes or actually even villains at times. And
Mhm.
I was like, this is not the same person, same character that I read growing up. You're just turning Spider-Man into a clone of Deadpool. And so many characters, it's just like they turn them into some Deadpool derivative or something along those lines. And I'm like, this is very strange. These guys don't have a functioning moral compass anymore. I don't know the good guys from the bad guys. You know, it's the up is down and down is up sort of thing. And I wanted at some point in time to write a series where you pitted clear evil up against men who were clearly good. Flawed men, we're all flawed, we're all sinners, but men who are trying to do the objectively correct or right or true thing in any given situation. Sometimes it's hard to discern what that is because when things are flying all over the place, it's confusing, but there is a right and wrong thing to do in any given situation. So I wanted to write something that was aspirational, that gave people hope, that imparted good messages to the readers. And like I said, there were characters that people of all ages, young people, old people, could look up to and learn something from.
All right, great.
Because
I
I would second that on what he just said. Because for some reason, I started to notice it too. Like all of a sudden, the characters kind of like sit in the moral gray area.
Mhm.
Nobody's really like, I'm just gonna do what's right because it's right. It's kind of like, well, it's like politics and stuff like that. And it's like some characters you can do that with and it works, but you can't really do that with like Superman. And for some
Right.
reason, they've been kind of trying to push him into that kind of dark, like moody, kind of almost Batman like uh persona. I have no
just
reason why.
he just doesn't fit that mold. He's always been the what humanity could become, the greater good that he's always represented, the Boy Scout.
He's supposed to be like that thing we're supposed to be striving to be, but now they kind of just like they grounding him more with like a lot of just I guess character flaws that
I
Yeah,
mean,
I just
and
don't. But
I've noticed as time has gone on, once upon a time, there were the writers were professional writers. They'd be like, this is a character. This is how there's a box essentially that there's the, Peter Parker box, and this is who he is as a character. And I have to try and separate myself from the character. I have to write the character. But as time went on, it's almost like these writers, it's just self-inserts. They think of themselves like, if I were Spider-Man, this is how I would behave. And it's like, but you're not Spider-Man. It's somebody else. It's a character. It's not you. You don't get to just put yourself into the shoes of Peter Parker and be like, oh, it's me, Doug, and I'm Spider-Man now. So I'm gonna write myself. And you're like, that's unprofessional, and that's the totally wrong way to do it. And if you go to I've gotten in trouble for this over the years. If you go to their social media feeds, you can see they're just writing themselves oftentimes into the books, and you're like, no, that's your pet issues, and it's just seeping into the books, and it's the way that you talk, it's your worldview. It is not Tony Stark's worldview, it's not Peter Parker's, it's not Matt Murdock's, it's you, and that's bad. Do an indie comic and write yourself into it if that's really what you want to do, but don't do that to Spider-Man or Superman or Batman.
Yeah, because I've loved Batman for the longest, and then I can't remember what the book was, but when I read it, I was just like, I'm done. When it was I can't remember. It's like the Gotham's under siege, riots going on. He's gliding over, and then he looks down at these people breaking into the store, and instead of him like throwing some gas pedals, breaking it up, or just trying to stop him from doing it, he's like, well, they got insurance, and then he just flies off. And I'm like, that's not.
Oh, that
Yeah,
was
no,
some
that's the
stuff,
kind of
2 years
stuff.
ago. Now,
It's just lazy writing.
now, speaking of Daredevil, I have a friend that owns a comic shop. He lent me, this was a dark Daredevil story because Bullseye was after him, I remember. And Matt Murdock, and I think this is from the late 90s, if I remember this, maybe early 2000s. Matt Murdock beat Daredevil on, Matt Murdock almost beat Bullseye to death. I mean, he was in the hospital. He shows, I believe the story was like The Man with No Fear, I believe it was. But this was before a lot of these crazy people self-inserting, but this is where I guess Marvel was really trying to experiment with the weird morally gray hero. But I mean, when you get to the scene where Bullseye is on the bed in the hospital, and you just see Matt Murdock pull up a pistol, and that smile just I was like, Marvel could have pushed into where Matt Murdock could have killed Bullseye right then and there. And I was like, that's a bit crazy for Matt Murdock to see, especially with the way his background is as the character before that story.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where over the years, so what they used to do is you would put the hero through the gauntlet. You would test him, you would put him under all sorts of stresses, and he might be near the breaking point or whatever. But at the end of the day, he would come out of it a stronger person. If you were going to deconstruct a character, at the end of the day, you would build him back up so he was even a better hero than he was before. And at some point in time, these writers and the industry became almost obsessed with deconstructing heroes, but they never built them back up. They just kept deconstructing and deconstructing and deconstructing. And then you're just left with like a mess, a gooey mess that is not the hero that, like I was saying earlier, it's not the heroes that we grew up with. It's something fundamentally different.
Cause I see more of these writers seem to be more interested in the villains more so than the heroes, because they seem, like you say, turning the heroes into villains, but kind of just doing it slowly. It's just one of those things. It's really just what drove me away from comics. Cause it's like, this is not Batman, this is Superman. Mary Jane and Spider-Man been together for years. All of a sudden now they're divorced and they can't get along. But yet the best-selling Spider-Man book is the one with those two together back together again.
Yeah, heroes are actually, they are harder to write in some sense because they exist within a moral box. And if you are a moral person, you have parameters. You will not go outside that. But the villains, they don't pay attention to the rules, so they can do anything. So if you're not into virtue or being a virtuous man, you're going to be very excited about being able to do anything that you want, but the heroes can't do anything. So you have to find a creative way to make them save the day, but existing within this box. And you have to portray that living in this virtue box is actually in your best interest as a human being. But they have it all. I just believe that a lot of these writers, they don't understand virtue. And so, but they're tasked with writing virtuous men. And instead of just admitting that they don't know about virtue, they don't care about it, they just say, well, we're going to write them this way because whatever reason they use to justify it. But the end result is, well, you're not writing superheroes anymore. You're just writing, I
Everyday
don't know.
life.
Yes. Something like that.
Because what was it? Mr. Chris, you might have a better grasp on this one, but when Peter Parker did get back with Mary Jane, I think in that specific issue, but then fell apart again. He was trying to start a family and all that, but I think the writer of that story didn't understand what a family was by either not being in a good one or just not having a proper family upbringing. I don't know. It's such a weird thing to see.
It's more so something about Mary Jane. It's for whatever reason they have not liked Mary Jane for a long time, and they've been trying to push those two apart for like decades. And it just all of a sudden it's like I'm like, you see, it works because I think what the book is called is I think it's Brand New Day. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Oh God, don't speak of that.
I'm like, it's like the links they go to break those two up just is one of the things you just look at it, you just shake your head like you just don't want him to be with this character. You just don't know how to write him being married. And I'm like, I'm 41. I'm married. So I don't mind reading about a married Spider-Man, but for some reason they want him to be single and just going out with just all these random chicks and stuff. And it's like, it's not that interesting. I know you wish that was your life and you were Spider-Man and you could have your pick of Black Cat and all the other, superheroes.
Hey, I'm just saying, Black Cat's a good option.
Yeah, but it's not him though.
This is true.
It is, and it proves it when they put out the book they have out now with him and Mary Jane that's separate from the 616. It's outselling, almost outselling his current book.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where they tried to make Peter Parker a Peter Pan-ish character where he's perpetually a child for decades and decades and decades, and it doesn't really work. And it does, but what does resonate with people is a hero who grows and evolves as a human being, as a man, and there's ways to logically do that, especially as the audience ages. And they would say like, oh, well, we want to still resonate with kids, but it's like, but that's not how it's written. You don't even write the comics for little kids anymore. You write them for guys our age in many respects. It's not even all ages, but then you still pretend as if you're writing for kids. So that's why we got to make Peter Parker a bachelor for like 100 years or something. But it's like, no, people want to see him as a responsible father who's imparting lessons to his daughter who also has superheroes. And that is much more entertaining to people these days. Not just Peter Parker hooking up with every single a hot female character under the sun. It's like on some level, it's like, the 20-year-old part of me is just like, all right, Peter, or whatever. But as a 45-year-old man who's married, I'm just like, this is kind of weird. This is kind of sad at this point. He's like a Will Ferrell character in, was it Old School or whatever? He's just kind of like sad.
They did try to make him Tony Stark at one time.
What was that? Parker Industries during the 2013, 2015 run?
Yeah, that was bad too, because Dan Slott was the writer. Don't get me started on Dan. I have a history with Dan Slott, but that was, as a writer, it always irritated me when somebody was writing, say, an entrepreneur, an Elon Musk type character, but they didn't know the first thing about business. And in fact, if you look at Dan Slott's history, he's in many respects, an anti-business type of person, anti-free market. Yeah. And so you need to be able to separate your own personal feelings about the world with the character. And it's like, if Tony Stark behaves one way, you probably should look into Elon Musk or CEOs of Apple and other people that, Steve Jobs characters, and see what it means to be a visionary entrepreneur or whatever, and then write that and incorporate that into your Iron Man books or Spider-Man if he becomes a business guy or whatever. But that's not what they did. He was just making things up on the fly, and you're just like, a good writer does his research. You're not researching, you're just throwing stuff out there, seeing what sticks. And as a result, your stories are not good.
This is very
Well,
true.
trust me, I know because he ruined Superman.
What?
No, because what's his name? Kamasi's Superman. I think it was when he had the nuclear family, and it's like it was actually really good.
Oh,
And then all of a
Super
sudden,
Sons.
yeah, and all of a sudden, Bendis came in, and it was just we're done with it.
Yep, I knew he was going to do that too, because that at Marvel, he's another one of these guys who likes to deconstruct things. And I loved Super Sons. It was so good. It was father-son relationship. There were comics that fathers could read with their sons or daughters or whatever, and introduce them to comic books. They had really good messages. And then when Bendis was coming over, I'm like, he is going to destroy this. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, because I remember I got the first issue. It's like okay, they changed it back to the trunks and everything, but it's like okay, well I don't want to talk about Lois. I'm like, well, what's going on with Lois? Y'all married and everything. You're like, oh no, he left with my dad, but she came back to Earth and got her own apartment, and now we're separated, and we don't know if we're married or not. I'm like, okay,
I mean, I
go
remember
away.
Lois Lane being very crazy back in the be the early Silver Age. Because dear God, they wrote Lois Lane in the early days. They really put Superman through the ringer with her. What was it?
No,
Once
but
she. Anyways, go. Sorry.
oh no, but when they no Rebirth was when I started getting back into it, and Rebirth Superman was extremely good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you like to see everywhere it was going, and all of a sudden he came in, and they just threw it all away and just said we're gonna start over again. And I'm like, I don't understand. I don't understand why you would start over again when everybody's telling you, hey, we like this, we're buying this. So why would you want to start over again with something new that's untested, just to reset the status quo to where he's basically they're not together, they're kind of dating, semi together type of thing.
My whole life, I didn't buy DC comics. I was always a Marvel guy. Again, Daredevil, Iron Man, Spider-Man, that's what I bought. But it was with Rebirth and things like Super Sons that literally got me into DC. And I was spending a pretty penny on DC for the first time in my life. And it all disappeared when Bendis came over because I was like, no, I just know what he's going to do. And my DC pull list or whatever, just zoop, gone.
Yeah,
It's over. I don't want to read this. And they shot themselves in the foot over and over and over because they want to believe that they're right, and they don't want to do the things that have worked for any number of reasons for years. And you're like, that's fine. You're just not going to get my money then. And that's exactly what happened.
yeah, because I can tell you, I was spending. I think when Rebirth came out, I was probably spending about $140 a week
Oof.
buying books because it was just that good. But then it's like all of a sudden it just, like I said, it just stopped and they just restarted everything over again, and they just threw away all the stories and stuff like that. It's like, what's the point then if y'all just gonna keep rebooting the stories and
Right.
just wiping everything out again?
Now
Yeah,
that
you
you
can't.
say that, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You can't get invested in something if they're just going to keep rebooting it over and over. And then the reboots, it's like they will just veer in different directions totally. And you're just like, I can't get it. Like you said, you're investing hundreds and then thousands of dollars into these things, and they're going to just do a U-turn on you randomly. And you're just like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send my money to people that respect my opinions about things and respect where the majority of the readers would like you to go.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think what killed DC for me was when they were about to have finally, after years, Batman was going to marry Selena Kyle, and then she leaves Bruce at the altar. I'm like, all right, we're closing this book. I'm never touching your stuff again. I think I think it was the White Knight mini series. I think that was the last thing I read in DC. So I think I told you about it, Chris, because that's where it's an alternate universe and all that for Batman. He's married to Harley Quinn at that time, but the Joker's trying to be cured or whatever. It's actually a pretty good miniseries, but DC and Marvel, as you said, too many reboots. Here's issue number one. Issue number one with like 50 different variants because Marvel went nuts with the damn symbiote covers for no damn reason. My God. Oh,
Yeah,
that was a
Marvel
nuts.
did. I can't remember who originally It's one of my favorite books, but I can't remember his name right offhand. They did Spider-Gwen, the original run. 'Cause
If I had it, I
I
could
got a
tell
signed
you, but I
copy
don't.
back there. Because I got a signed copy back there, and it's like the whole time we're reading this, it's like it's really, really good, and it's getting better by every issue. And then just right in the middle of a story arc, they completely stop her story to do a 6-part crossover with Miles Morales that has nothing to do with what's going on. And I'm like, and I know it's to basically raise the sales on his book because you had to buy her book and then the next issue was his book. So you had to buy 3 copies of his book and 3 copies of hers to make it a full set, which I have it because I was just like, I'm gonna read it just because she's in it. But they just for some reason she got super popular, and then instead of leaving her where she was, where you could tell all these interesting stories like an alternate Marvel universe, they said nope, we're gonna get rid of her universe. Now we're gonna bring her into the regular universe. So now she's just another Spider person in the universe, and her book sales have pretty much started to drop off because it's not interesting. Like you had a whole world where you could just tell any kind of story you wanted to with her, and you didn't have to be constrained by continuity or anything. But for some reason, they wanted to bring her over there and put her in the 616 with everybody else, which made no sense.
Well, it's like
Yeah,
when
it's
Miles. Oh, go ahead.
no, the Marvel editors and DC editors, it's almost like the modern ones anyway, they never miss an opportunity to make a boneheaded decision that you're just like leaves readers who were excited about it just very confused. Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
We'll never understand because they worship the almighty dollar and don't seem to understand. Like if we make
But
what
that's
the
the problem,
fans
though.
want,
They're not making that much money off the books
if
no
we
more.
make what they want, we'll make money. But it's as Mr. Douglas said earlier, a bunch of insert me stories right now, and it's just killing the market on the mainstream for them, anyways. But that's fine. That's allowing like Mr. Douglas, Mr. Eric, Tim, and Mark to rise up
Yeah.
as like pretty much the old trees have rotted out finally. You got new trees starting to grow, and there's a vast field for them to fill. Maybe
Yeah,
that
that's
might not.
something I've noticed at shows as we've gone around is the refrain from people over and over again is we're looking for something new. And so that to me, that's very refreshing because I'm like, oh, if you're looking for something new, I have something new for you. And it works out well. But I just think people are they feel like they're on this merry-go-round where it's just like the same stories over and over and over again. And for whatever reason, the writers are either incapable of breaking out into new ground or they're just being told by editors that they can't or whatever the case is, but what they're doing is stale.
I don't think that they're scared, dude. I just think they don't want to. I think they just want to do what they want to do with the character. They don't feel like you said, like you have to write this character like it is. They feel like, no, no, no. I'm gonna write this character the way I want to write this character, even if it breaks all the canon that he's had or she's had before. I'm gonna do it the way I want it because I think this is the best way to do it.
Yeah, I sort of look at them like little kids that just like to break things for the sake of breaking things. It's really fun to break. You know, when you're a kid, you just whatever. And it's like if you can't do the job, and it's almost like subconsciously they're frustrated. And instead of acknowledging that or walking away and letting somebody else do the job that they can't do, they're like, well, if I can't have it, I'm going to break it on somebody else. And multiple times they creatively break characters and then laugh at you when you get mad at them for doing it.
A great example right at the end of Big Time for Spider-Man. You had Doc Ock take over Spider-Man's body. It's like what what kind of backwards? Ah, yes, I hacked your suit. And now I have control of your. And it was SWAT bodies. Enjoy my decrepit body. And it's now I will say because it did tick me off, but I will say this Superior Spider-Man series where Doc Ock was Peter Parker for a while was actually pretty good. I'll give him that because he was effective as Batman because of all the spider bots all over the city. Oh, there's a crime. 911's being called. Crazy networking, but that's about the only praise I really have for that. But
It was
I guess,
good, but you knew Peter Parker was coming back
oh
eventually.
yeah,
But the thing with that is Dan Slott said he basically did not want to bring. He was forced to bring Peter Parker back for the whatever the Spider-Man movie was that came out at the time. That essentially
Civil War.
it came down.
It
I'm trying
wasn't
to think.
Spider-Verse, was it?
I think it was Civil War when Spider-Man was just first appearing for this
Oh, yeah.
MCU. That was
No, well, there whatever the case was, there was a Spider-Man.
Right.
One of the Sony movies were coming out, and he was told you have to bring Peter back in conjunction with this movie, and he didn't want to. But Peter had not been Spider-Man for I want to say like a year or almost like a year and a half,
Yeah.
something like that.
and so that's where like the story itself. I felt like years ago they would have done the story, but it would have been like maybe a 4-issue arc and then
Yeah.
over. Whereas if you listen to Dan, he really liked writing Doc Ock as Spider-Man. So that's why you probably liked it, because he had more energy and was more invested in that than the actual hero. Once again, they like writing the villains. They don't like writing the heroes. And Dan Slott has said he doesn't even really like Peter Parker as a character. He likes writing Spider-Man. He doesn't like writing Peter Parker, but he doesn't understand that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He's the guy in the suit, but Dan wants it to be just like, no, anybody who has the suit, you're Spider-Man. And I could just go on all day about how he fundamentally does not get Peter Parker, and he doesn't get virtue, and he doesn't get heroism. And that's why he had to go to Superior Spider-Man and didn't want to write Peter Parker.
Tell me, who made Miles? It was Dan Slott, wasn't it?
It was Bendis that was actually created Miles Morales.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a question for you. What is your opinion on Jonathan Hickman? Because he did some of my if not one of the best Fantastic Four runs, I'll say, and Avenger runs that Marvel had, but that was like only one of their few saving graces to me, anyways. Because like Fantastic Four is the definitive of like the family unit, a hero family. Even though Reed Richards does make some dumb mistakes sometimes, but that just comes with the territory.
Yeah, I've always heard good stuff about his runs, but like I said, I only stuck to Spidey, Iron Man, and Daredevil. Those were my guys. I didn't really like branch out. If there were crossovers here and there, I would check it out, but I've never really been into Fantastic Four for whatever reason. I don't know, but back in the day, it was just like, all right, if you were picking up those 3 titles per month, and then Spider-Man had like multiple, so there's like Amazing Spider-Man, and then they would have like Web of Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man, and then there were other like special one-shots, and so it's just like more a limited budget more than anything else.
Well, I guess I'll ask this, because since you've probably read through all the good, even yet the terrible of Spider-Man, the Clone Saga.
Yeah, the Clone Saga, it's weird because at the time that actually caused me to drop Spider-Man for like a couple years. I went back and ended up getting all the issues, or like 99% of the issues. But I dropped Spider-Man for like a few years because of that, because I hated the idea that the Peter Parker that you've read your entire life since a kid was not really him, and they pulled this switcheroo, or they were trying to, but then they had to fix it and make it back, and it was just all convoluted. But I will say that as convoluted as that whole thing was, if you compare it to what they're writing today, you can see that there is a love for comic books and superheroes, and it's sort of like the George Lucas Star Wars, when they came out with his new ones, or the prequels or whatever. Those I had my issues with back in the day, but then when you compare them to what they're doing now, you're like, I can still see the love that Lucas had. As weird as some of the decisions were that he made, like I can still see this man loves what he's doing and he cares about it. And so the Clone Saga to me is something where in hindsight, it's just so light years better than what we're getting today. And so I'm, I feel bad that I was like as rough on it as I was back in the day.
It's understandable, because I I love because I grew up watching the prequel movies along with the older Star Wars films. But then I'm like, I was hyped for the Force Awakens. I'm like, listen, I'm allowed to say this because I bought a couple of friends tickets. I bought like 4 people tickets to go see this with me. I'm allowed to have my $50 opinion here. But like when you saw his son, because when they said it's like, oh, you just killed Han Solo. This is A New Hope all over again. Why am I watching this? Who is Rey? What is her purpose? Finn. When I first saw Finn, I'm like, this will be this stormtrooper becoming a Jedi. This will be a good plot. And the series progressed, and he turned into a fumbling fool. And then the random lady that probably fixed the air ducts was like, "I love you, Finn." Runs out in front of. I'm like, what convoluted plot line are y'all going with? Why?
Because
Yeah,
it didn't make it. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was
Oh,
gonna
no.
say what was so weird to me is that when you listen to the interviews, they didn't actually have it like mapped out like the the 3-movie arc. It was just like more like a race and a baton, and you handed it to the next guy, and you hoped that he would continue with what you were doing, but he wasn't under any obligation to do that, and they allowed so it was like all weird. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see where they're going. And then it just, again, it was like this zigzag weird. And you're like, no, Finn should be this, like you said, the stormtrooper that becomes the Jedi. And then they just turned him into this slapstick comedy fool. And it was weird because back in the day, they said, if you criticize this, you're basically racist. And I was like, no, you were the ones that made the black guy into this Fozzie Bear waka 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 ridiculous character, that when he should have been the one who became the Jedi, and it was set up perfectly for it. You guys are the ones that are screwing it up. Like, I'm actually defending Finn and what he should have been, and it was logically leading in that direction. And you had him like coming out with, what was it, like weird tubes?
Yeah, it's like some like bubble fluid type thing that was part of
dripping on himself and all this. And I'm like, no, you clearly don't like this character. Whatever happened, I don't know what's going on, but you're making a joke out of a guy who should have been a Jedi, and it was perfectly set up to do that, and you dropped the ball.
Yeah, I should sue them for that because it's false advertisement. Because when you see the first trailer for it, it ends with the lightsaber coming and him grabbing it and igniting it. So you think everything is pointing to him being the Jedi,
right?
Not Rey. I don't even think they really even show her in the first trailer. I don't even think they really show her.
Not that I remember, no.
Like, it's more focused on him. So it's like, well, that's why I went into it thinking the same thing, that he was going to be the main character. And then he kind of just falls into the background with Poe, and they're just like doing slapstick comedy back and forth. And it just don't get me started.
It's really intriguing that somebody who was dedicated to the Empire, who then becomes disillusioned, and the scales fall from his eyes, and he sees the truth, and he begins to learn about the Jedi, and completely transforms himself. He was a man who was mired in whatever sin or darkness or whatever, and he comes to the light and becomes a true Jedi warrior. You're like, there you go. That's your story. Boom. You're going to make $1 billion or whatever the heck. Nope. We're just going to go in strange directions that are, then we have reshoot after reshoot after reshoot.
Oh,
we don't even know what we're doing. It was just sad.
Because as much as I have my problems with The Force Awakens, I think it does set up a lot of things. It's The Last Jedi that kind of just completely goes off the rails and just completely destroys Luke Skywalker to the point where he's unrecognizable in that movie.
When Luke threw the lightsaber over his shoulder, and I saw that in the movie, I was like, is this a joke? Am I like hallucinating? And then when he did the milk thing with the
God,
all that, I was like, am I dreaming? Did I take drugs? Is this real? I don't know what's going on. And I was like so mad in the theater. And then there was a weird vibe in the theater because there was a lot of people, I think, that were like my age, and people were like, do I just walk out or do I just go? Like, how do I respond to this? Like, I don't even know what to do. Like, I guess I'm going to go with it. But I was just
clap and consume next product.
Right. I was so mad.
No, because I remember that scene. Because I remember me and a friend, we was in there, and the scene where he gets the lightsaber, he just tosses it over his shoulder. I kind of stopped for a second and like, and then I turn and look at her like what is he doing? It like Luke Skywalker would not throw away his lightsaber. He would not put his X-wing in the ocean for decades and let it sit. He wouldn't hide away on a planet, cut himself away from the Force like that.
Right.
Like that's not Luke Skywalker.
I think the defining moment that killed Luke Skywalker to me is like, I sense darkness in my nephew. I must kill him. I'm like,
he's
Luke
not
would
going to
never
kill his
do
own
this.
father, who was Darth Vader, you know, like planet killer, all this sort of stuff. And he had, you know, there was still hope in his father that up until his last breath, he could, you know, change him or whatever, which is very like Christian sort of idea that there's always that hope until your last, you know, until you die, that you could repent for your sins or whatnot. So Luke was very much, in many respects, like a Christian noble character or whatever. And in the original series, and then in the next one, at the hint of evil, he's willing to kill his nephew or strike him down. And you're like, that's literally not Luke. That is not Luke at all.
Basically, kill him in his sleep, really.
Right.
Yeah,
that was the weirdest thing.
And I don't want to sound like a violent person, but I just like wanted to slap Mark Hamill, because like when I remember watching one of those first interviews, I think because they did this to George Lucas with some of the films, like the one that cuts and anything. It's like, I didn't have it that way, but the face Mark Hamill had when he saw what happened to pretty much Luke Skywalker just turned into this hermit or whatever in The Last Jedi, you just saw he was just flabbergasted, and it's like, I'll just accept my fate.
Right.
They'll give me more money. I'm like, fight for you, brother. You were like the hero to people for like at least 2 generations, and you're have a backbone, have a spine. I don't know.
He concentrated too hard and vaporized into the Force, which makes no sense why that even happened.
And it was weird because when you watched certain interviews with him, you can see that deep down, he knows that he basically sold his soul, and he didn't have a spine and went through with a betrayal of his own character. And it's like privately he regrets it, but it's like, but you still did it, dude. You still did it. So
Yeah.
I mean,
I honestly think
a lot.
I honestly think you could have killed him in The Last Jedi, but at least make him go out like a badass, like a master Jedi would go out defending people, trying to give them time to escape. And I think people would have been fine with him, you know, going that way. But just the fact that he force cast himself across the universe and somehow that drained him so much that he became one with the Force, like it goes against all the stuff that George Lucas has already set up. Like that's not how you become one with the Force.
I said years ago that it seemed like Disney hired someone who hated, like deep down, hated Star Wars, and was like, here, do a Star Wars movie. And then when I listened to interviews with him where he wants to subvert expectations and all this sort of stuff, I'm like, no, he really does hate. He hated the original trilogy. He did want to kill it. He doesn't like Star Wars, and he got the Star Wars movie. And I was like, this is horrible.
What our expectations were that he was going to be, Luke was going, especially at the end of the last movie, where we only get like a few seconds of him. When we see him in the next movie, we're expecting him to be like a fully fledged Jedi master who's going to actually train Rey, instead of her just being, you know, wonderful from the day she picks up a lightsaber and doesn't need anybody to train her, but she knows all the Force techniques and everything.
Yeah.
They don't even know what subverting expectations means. There's a way to subvert expectations where you basically throw somebody a curveball, they didn't see it coming, and then it's like, oh, that was actually like pretty cool or whatever. But in their mind, it's like subverting expectations is just doing something really mean to the character and the viewing audience that was expecting something. And if you make them angry, then you've succeeded. And it's like, no, you just did a mean thing to people that grew up with Star Wars, and there was no reason for you to do the thing you did. You're just a mean person, Rian Johnson.
Well, they've already said they don't want the old fans; they want the new fans.
Who are the new fans? I need to know this because they ain't paying. According to the box office, they've lost
It's the same thing with the comic book. They want new fans, but
$1 billion.
you're willing to throw away the old fans who are willing to spend hundreds of dollars on your products. Let's throw them away for new fans that don't want to spend any money on you. It just like it just blows my mind when I think about it.
And they screwed up with Disney World so I went there after they like refurbished and did all the Star Wars stuff, and it was all, you know, very focused on all the new things. And I was like, you at least could have incorporated a lot of like the old stuff, because all the parents and the grandparents that are taking the little kids there love the original. So you could go into the cantina and order your, I don't know, whatever, your food, and you get all this sort of stuff. But then they're like, no, we're just going to make it the new stuff. But then nobody showed up. And apparently that element of the park has been a total disaster for them.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they were
Galaxy Edge.
giving tickets half off. If I remember the last time I heard anything about that, they're almost giving them away.
Yeah, my sister and her husband took my nieces there. The only thing they said was worth it was the Rise of the Republic ride that was there. That was worth it, they said, because they were like, it was, if you want to make a droid, it's $100 to $150 to make a droid. It's around $200 to $400 for a lightsaber to make one.
What?
And I'm
No,
like,
thank you.
nobody's going to spend that kind of money, especially if you got a family of 3 or 4 kids. Like, nobody's going to spend, you know, like $100 per droid to get
Right.
one for each one. Like, it's just too much.
You can go to Etsy and buy a lightsaber or make a droid with a 3D printer for like $50 probably. Now,
But go ahead.
well, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say,
that's just Disney. Disney just is at that point where Star Wars isn't making no money. The Acolyte is a piece of garbage.
I was
And
hoping you weren't going to mention that.
no, I tuned out after the first episode. I'm like, this is because it breaks too many canon rules that have already been established for years, and it just
Well, remember, they're making their own now. This is a fan fiction. Anything outside the original 6
you
and Clone
tell
Wars
me
saga, it's
me
trash.
tell me how a Jedi gets killed by a throwing knife.
Very careless one, apparently. Well, if y'all don't mind, we'll segue into a promotion for Soulfinder 4. And I believe you're releasing that when, Mr. Douglas?
So the soft cover will be available probably within the next couple weeks. We're putting that together right now. I would like literally before I came on with you guys, I was texting with the guys down at Iconic Comics down in Texas about how we're going to do that. So they're basically just writing the pages, and then there's bundles. So we have like a Memento Mori rosary that we're going to have with it. And then we have like different pins that are essentially the Soulfinder unit patch that will appear in future issues. And so we're just putting together all the bundles and the pricing and figuring out the packaging, if they order certain combinations, what boxes to put them in and how much to charge, and all of that sort of the logistical stuff. And as soon as that's done, basically we're just going to press the go button. So it should be within the next couple of weeks. My guess is I think we're going to get it done before July, but if not, it'll be very early July.
All right. Now one of these images, I will show. It's a comic page if you're all right with it from what you sent me. And I believe, I'm not sure where exactly this takes part in the book, but I think you'll let our viewers know.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's Soulfinder Tunnel Hounds, and that's fairly early into the book, and they're getting ready for a mission. And that's a page where they have to, there's another team that's coming to help them out. And these characters have a past together, and there's some friction between them. And the one main character, Father Crane, it's actually his origin tale. He's in the other Soulfinder books. It's his Vietnam origin tale. Is he used to be part of this one team, but then he became part of what's called the Tunnel Hounds, which is inspired by the Vietnam tunnel rats. Those are the guys that went into the the cave systems and all the underground systems in Vietnam. So they're like, they did the job that like nobody else wanted to do. It was super crazy dangerous. You're going into like total darkness. There's booby traps. They got poisonous scorpions. They got poisonous snakes. They got, again, all sorts of like grenade booby traps and things like that. And so anyway, like I said, there's friction between his old team and where he is now, but they have to work together on this mission, and they're sort of setting that up.
All right. Now, my next question is, or it's going to be two in one question. What inspired you to, or what inspired you to write Soulfinders, the story itself? And since you've been working with Iconic Comics, what's that been like?
Sure. So kind of like I was saying, I think off stream is I got sick of seeing anti-heroes in comics that were just completely prevalent all over the place, or the heroes I grew up with that they were no longer heroes anymore. And sometimes they were actually villains. And so I wanted to pit just straight up evil against good guys who had a functioning moral compass. And so you can't get any more evil than a demon. And then I was like, who would logically go up against the demon? Okay, well, a priest. And then that was the other thing, is I got tired of seeing in comic books, anytime you see a Catholic priest, oftentimes he's going to be secretly a mustache twirling villain. He's going to be revealed to be like a bad guy. Or they just straight up get the basic like catechism of the church wrong. So you're like, he's not even Catholic. Like he looks like a Catholic, but you're just saying things that are wrong. So I was like, all right, now I could actually do like an actual priest. And I was like, a lot of times, this is from like a more Christian perspective, you oftentimes have figures like a Doctor Strange character who's into the occult, who will cast out demons or whatnot. But from a Christian perspective, it doesn't work, because you're just using demonic means to deal with the demonic. So you would actually be making the problem like exponentially worse. So I was like, no, I want to actually have like an actual Catholic priest who is performing exorcisms and dealing with these demons. And then I was like, it would also be cool if they had a military background, because then that would just open up all sorts of different genres. I can do a little tiny intimate tale in a house, or I could like do an espionage tale. I could do an action adventure tale. I could do mysteries. And so having that military element to it just allows it to go to a global scale. If I want to, I can involve other militaries. I can involve the Pentagon. And so there's just so many possibilities with the concept of a combat veteran exorcist.
Now, speaking of that, it would have been, I believe, last year you had a crossover with Tim and Mark's Black Ops and Come On America. Now, what brought on such I would say, a phenomenal crossover book?
Yeah, so that was something where, I mean, Tim and I have been friends for years now, and Tim and Mark were instrumental in even getting Soulfinder off the ground. They helped me out a lot with, I wrote the script, but then I turned it over to them and said, like, what do you think about this? And then, so they helped add meat to the bones, essentially. And so we've just been friends for a long time. We trust each other. They know Soulfinder better than anyone, outside of myself. They know the property better than anybody else. I trust them. I know that they're a solid team. Mark is a great writer. And so there's just a lot of trust between us. And so I said years ago, you guys, since you helped me out so much, you have a blank check. You ever want to use the Soulfinders, go for it. And whatever you want to do, I trust you guys. So, but it has to be logical. I don't want to just like a gimmicky thing, like, oh, look, there's a Soulfinder in here, like buy it because there's this, but it's like a cameo that doesn't mean anything. So our rule is basically, if my characters appear in his work or his in mine, it has to be important. It has to be something that is meaningful and will have a lasting impact on the character. So it's not just he just shows up and just buy it because he's in there. It's like, no. So in Soulfinder Tunnel Hounds, Tim and Mark's father Blatty it's actually his origin tale as well. He is on the team with Father Crane. They were both tunnel hounds, and they on a particular mission to capture or kill this particular Vietnamese general. They had a Soulfinder embedded with them, and what they saw on that particular mission changed the trajectory of their lives. So Tim and Mark were kind enough to allow me to use Father Blatty. And like I said, they always have a blank check to use Soulfinders if it makes sense for the story. So Tim and Mark were like, hey, we got an idea. We think this would, Soulfinders would be perfect because there's a supernatural element that we're working into the stories. Is it cool? And I was like, yeah, cool. And then they just kind of do their thing. And I was very happy with it.
All right. I'll say, when I first saw Black Ops, I'm like, it's a bunny rabbit with a knife and a grenade. What is going on here? And I read further into it. I'm like, all right, this kind of makes sense. But me telling other people, because word of mouth is like the best advertisement. Like I don't know if Chris got tired of me telling him about some of this stuff, because like it's just the concepts, because as you said, it needs to have some logic to it. And it just works within the universe all of y'all have created. Though I will say, when I first discovered Common America through I think it was just randomly on Twitter, I was like, this seems pretty cool. I'm kind of looking for something new to read. Started really getting into it, and just and I say this about, because I was talking to Chris a little bit. Reading your stuff along with Tim and Mark's and Eric's stuff, it's like reading Spawn all over again to me, because Todd McFarlane was a terrible writer in the beginning. And that just comes with the territory, because he was a great artist, but his storytelling was bad, but he got better with it. And that's what, and I'm not saying none of y'all are bad at writing or anything. It's just the journey going from the very beginning of, all right, he started his own thing, and it just grew into this juggernaut of a franchise. And I can't think of anybody that doesn't enjoy Spawn from one in particular avenue or another, because most people ask where to pick up on that series. I tell them it's like, you don't have to read all. It's like, I think it's like issue 100, I think, is when Spawn. Yeah, usually issue 100. But I like some of the very beginning stuff is still important, but kind of accept it for what it is.
There's definitely a learning curve to writing sequential art storytelling. It's completely different than writing a novel. Or I came from I was writing for a newspaper back in the day. And then Tim, with his background, he was, well, first of all, his normal job, he's doesn't have anything to do with art, but he is an artist. And then he also worked in marketing and things like that. But then he also had to transition into sequential art storytelling as well. And so I think with all of us, it was like, yeah, like you said, you get to see the growing pains along the way. But it's something where it's like, so with the first Soulfinder Demons match, I didn't even do like a double page spread with Tim. And then after the fact, I was like, why on earth, I had Tim as an artist, why did I not write into the script a double page spread to like highlight his artistic skills? Like something so stupid. I was so focused on trying to get the story like straight that I didn't take advantage of the artist. I had like, a couple splash pages or whatever, especially the first page, but there were so many things in terms of an artistic level that I didn't get. And then I was like, okay, on the second one, now I'm going to, Matt Weldon is doing the art. I'm going to make sure I got my splash page, and I'm going to have a proper double page spread in there because he's a great artist. And so each book, I'm learning something new, and, usually kicking myself about what I left out in the previous version. And so ideally, every single book, you should be able to see like, no, he's getting better at like the page transitions, or he's incorporating, new art the panels have different layouts to them that they didn't have originally, and he's gelling with the artist and the creative team, because that's the other thing is the longer that you work with people, like the more you just gel as a team and you get each other and you work. And so I don't know, I've just been really happy with the entire sort of like journey of working with everybody at Iconic Comics. It's been a blast.
Now, how did Iconic Comics just like start, if you don't mind telling us? Because they just kind of came out of nowhere to me as a publisher, I guess.
Right. So Iconic is kind of weird in that so essentially what happened was Tim and Mark and I were doing our books. Tim was doing Black Ops Common America, and then he was doing the parody books back in the day. And I did Soulfinder with Tim, but I was going to keep doing Soulfinder with Matt. And after we did the book, we were just like, man, the fulfillment and distribution of these books is really a pain in the butt, and it's going to be a problem moving forward, especially the more books we do. And then at the time, if you're working full-time jobs and you're trying to do this, you got families, responsibilities, and suddenly you're trying to mail hundreds, or maybe if you're Tim and Mark, thousands of books. You're like, we have to figure out a way to like streamline this or become more efficient. And so Tim had a friend who kind of weirdly enough always wanted to do that. And so it was like, okay, well, if you want to do this, let's go for it. And so he essentially created Iconic Comics, and then it was like more of a fulfillment and distribution thing. But then also it became, then it just built on top of that. So then it's like, now we have the website, and you could buy all the books on the website, but then people wanted to be involved with Iconic. So then it's a system where it's set up where it's basically just doing fulfillment and distribution, but there's creators that all exist under that umbrella that all believe in the core vision of Iconic Comics, if that makes sense, where it's the art has to be a certain up to par, the writing has to be a certain level, you have to get your books out when within a reasonable amount of time. You can't have campaigns that implode upon themselves. There's a certain level of professionalism. When people say they don't like your books, you can't fly off the handle at them and start talking about their mother or whatever. Like, you have to be professional. So there's all this like criteria that the guy who runs Iconic tries to everybody has to kind of fit within that sort of teamwork frame or mold or whatever you want to call it.
And I will say, from what you've just said, like everything just aligned for all of y'all. Just the time was right. Your time is now. And it's as corny as this is all sounding, y'all have been on a hero's journey. And I would say, from a perspective, because I do art on the side or whatever, I'm just a graphic designer, though. I don't draw quite well yet. Working on that. It's just been amazing to see what y'all have established and what the Ripperverse has established too. There are no endorsements, by the way, in case anybody asks for paid promotions. We're saying this because it's cool stuff. Go watch it. Go read it. Well, you know how YouTube is. I'm like, there's a promotion in there. You trying to make money. And I mean, like Chris and I was like, hey, let's just go do a podcast. Here we are 24 episodes later. Some of them have been hit or miss, but if you would have asked me a year ago, would I be interviewing probably one of the coolest writers of the last 5 years? I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you yes or no to that, because every time someone asks, what are your plans for the next 5 years or 10 years? I don't know what's coming through the door. God only knows. I'm just along for the ride at this point. And I just hope I can make the right decision or whatnot to at least get it going and not blow the opportunity. Because I will say, this morning, the way this day was going, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well. Get to work like 6 a.m. This deli gets floated because a piece of a sink cracked. And I mean, just everything's like falling apart. And they're like, you usually would have a crappy day. And I was like, no, whatever problem. All right, that's fine. We'll get it fixed. Just throughout the whole day, as I know our good friend Chris here, he just started a new job, and I know it's had its challenges on him.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was looking forward to this the whole time. I was like, nothing's gonna bring me down. I'm good to go, and it's just good, genuine. Just get through the day. I'm thankful to be doing this.
Well,
This
thanks
is
for rolling with the punches with my car trouble and the time frame for the viewers don't know that, but they know that my car issues caused some hiccups along the way, and you were able to like roll with that pretty well.
listen. That's no problem. I made a mistake because I was like, oh, he said Central. Oh wait, he meant Pacific. I'm an hour off. Dang it. But man, God, we could go on forever about stuff, but I'm sure your wife wants to spend the rest of the evening with you and all that. Same with you, Mr. Chris. But I guess, do you have anything else to say for our viewers?
No, I just want to thank you for extending an invite to me to talk about Soulfinder, to talk about indie comics. I had a great time with both you guys. It was a great discussion, and I'm just really just grateful that anyone cares enough to hear what I want to say. So, so thank you very much for the invite and the great conversation.
It's no problem, man. We'll definitely try to have you back on. I'll see if I can try to get Tim and Mark, but I feel like that's going to be a challenge and a half because I know they're busy beyond belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a lot of lot of pots and pans on the stove, basically. And even this weekend, they got a little, not a show, but like they're an appearance down at a comic shop or whatever.
Yeah,
And I
there
think,
was a signing.
am I getting screwed up here? Is it Arkansas? But anyway, they're always bouncing around, going places, doing stuff. And last week we were in North Carolina. So, yeah, if they could fit it into their schedule, and I'm sure after they watch this, they can see you guys are super professional in terms of how you handle themselves. I can see them trying to make it happen, but regardless, they're going to keep coming out with books for sure.
Oh, definitely. And that Common America has been a great story to read, along with a lot of the others that are under Iconic Comics. Though I do have one question before we go, because I know Tim and Eric always go to BellCon. I believe it's Austin, Texas. Are you going to be there this year?
Yeah, I'll be at Bell County Comic Con. It's basically about 45 minutes north of Austin. And last year, I think they had 40,000 people that showed up over the course of the show. So yeah, I will be back there again. Tim and Mark will be back. And I don't know who all has been announced, but basically there'll be an Iconic Comics island in the arena there, and there'll be plenty of Iconic Comics writers and artists and creators there.
All right, Chris, you know where we got to go in August. We got to plan the trip.
Oh, I can't go in August. It depends on what day, because the 25th is my anniversary.
It's the first weekend in August.
There you go.
Think
Yeah,
about it. It's always a great time, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't want your wife mad at me trying to kill me.
Because that's what about from Georgia to Texas. What about, I think, 8 to 12 hours?
Yeah, I think it's a 12-hour drive. Maybe one stop. Looking at that. But
stop at Buc-ee's along the way.
There's not a Buc-ee's far from me. I love their fudge, but it is an expensive treat, so I don't.
Yeah, because I think we got it about, I'm gonna say about 3-4 years ago, and it has been the biggest explosion in this area because everybody goes to.
I just don't understand the fascination. That place might as well be a Walmart on its own, and then the food you get there, it's restaurant quality, but at a fast pace, which is really weird for me to say. But it's like, why haven't they opened a restaurant yet? Just completely with all this advertisement? It looked like a Chuck E. Cheese of some kind.
No, it's always packed, no matter what time of day you go there. It's like it's completely. The parking lot is completely. It's as big as a school, and it's like the parking lot is completely full every day.
I swear, it's like their mega center. I know I went to Daytona last year. We found. I think I tagged Mark in it, and it's called Bees, I was like, this has to be the Buc-ee's of Florida because of how big it was. It made no sense to me. But well, we thank you for your time, man.
Yes, sir. We definitely thank you.
But folks, that is going to be it. Y'all have a blessed morning or afternoon or evening, whichever it may be for you in your respective time zone.
Well, thanks again. See you.
See you later. That's it.